9 AD, the mist-shrouded banks of the River Thames, Britannia. The chill clung to the skin like a whispered warning. Fog rolled across the river, curling around the wooden stakes of a hastily erected Roman camp. Soldiers, armor dull under the gray dawn, shifted nervously, their breaths forming clouds that mingled with the mist. The scent of damp earth and smoke from the early morning fires lingered, heavy with the promise of something unseen. Legionaries sharpened their gladii with methodical precision, but their hands trembled. Somewhere in the distance, a lone horn echoed from the edge of the forest, its tone uncertain, half a warning, half a taunt. The commander, Centurion Lucius Petronius, scanned the horizon, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. Whispers traveled like wind through the camp, rumors of rebellious tribes, tales of ambushes, strange lights flickering in the woods. No one dared laugh. In the barracks, a young recruit named Gaius pressed his back against the wooden wall, heart hammering as he tried to reconcile the stories of bravery he had grown up on with the unease he now felt. Sweat, despite the cold, ran down his brow. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes disaster but gives no clue of its shape. No one here knew the world was about to change forever. This is the story of how an entire Roman legion, one of the most disciplined and feared military forces of the empire, vanished without a trace. The 9th Legion, stationed in Britannia at the height of Rome's power, would disappear from history, leaving behind whispers, theories, and centuries of mystery. To understand how this event unfolded, we must step into the boots of those who lived it. Men bound by duty, honor, and fear, men who marched, fought, and perhaps never returned. Fog thickened, swallowing the riverbank, as if the world itself were conspiring to hide what was about to happen. Somewhere beyond the visible, in the shadows of ancient trees, eyes watched. And the legion, confident in its steel and discipline, had no idea what waited just beyond the horizon. Dawn broke reluctantly over the misty Thames, a dim gray light filtering through the skeletal branches of the surrounding forest. The camp stirred. Soldiers emerged from the tents, their boots squelching in mud, armor clinking softly as they adjusted shields and helmets. Centurion Lucius moved among them, issuing orders with a sharp, clipped tone, trying to instill confidence where there was only tension. The river, usually placid, whispered threats in the form of ripples and unseen currents. Boats creaked against the dock, their oars moving sluggishly through cold water, carrying messages from scouts who had ventured into the dense woodland. Reports were fragmented, each more troubling than the last. Signs of ambush, burned huts along nearby roads, the eerie silence of villages emptied in fear. Gaius, the young recruit, tightened his grip on his gladius. He had heard tales of Germanic tribes crushed by Roman legions, of fortress walls that no barbarian could breach. Yet here, in this fog-bound frontier, those stories felt hollow. There was a sense that the land itself was conspiring against them, a living, breathing obstacle that shifted with the wind. By mid-morning, the 9th Legion assembled for inspection. Centurion Lucius's eyes swept across the ranks, counting, nodding, correcting posture, masking the gnawing anxiety that lurked behind every commanding order. The men were disciplined, battle-hardened, but the land they occupied was not. Mist swirled around their legs, obscuring what lay beyond, and every snapped twig or sudden shadow set nerves on edge. They began their march into the forest, drums beating in measured cadence. The soldiers' boots sank into wet earth, water dripping from the leaves onto polished shields. Every step seemed louder than the last, echoing in the dense woods like a prelude to some unknown reckoning. The air smelled of decay and rain-soaked soil. And yet, no hostile force appeared. Only the endless, whispering green of Britannia, stretching in every direction. By noon, the scouts returned with news that made even Lucius's stoic jaw tighten. Tracks, too many, too organized, cut through the undergrowth. Strange symbols etched into trees, unfamiliar formations, signs of a force that knew the forest better than any Roman map. A sense of unease grew. Something was lurking, patient, unseen, and strategic. The 9th Legion pressed onward, unaware that the ground beneath them was shifting, both figuratively and literally. Every order, every maneuver, every disciplined step carried them further into a trap that history would remember only as disappearance. Shadows lengthened under the canopy, carrying whispers that the men could not hear, hints of a fate they would soon be powerless to avoid. The forest seemed endless, closing in, swallowing sound and light alike. And for the first time that day, even the hardened veterans felt it, a fear unlike any enemy they had faced before. Something darker was stirring beneath the surface. By late afternoon, the 9th Legion had penetrated deeper into the shadowed woods, the mist now clinging to their armor and hair like a living veil. The usual sounds of wildlife, birds, rustling mammals, the hum of insects, had vanished. Only the squelch of boots in mud and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot broke the suffocating silence. Gaius's stomach twisted with every step. He had survived drills, skirmishes, even the march from Rome, but the forest tested a different kind of fear, the one that came from not knowing, from the unseen. Lucius noticed the subtle changes first. Trees bore strange scratches, bark gouged as though clawed by some immense predator, symbols etched in lines that made no sense. Scouts returned, faces pale, mouths trembling, insisting that the forest seemed alive. "They're watching us," one whispered. And in the silence that followed, even the centurion's voice faltered for a fraction of a heartbeat. The first skirmish was sudden. From the undergrowth, a volley of arrows cut through the mist, striking men before anyone could raise shields. Chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted, shields banged, and horses screamed in panic. The forest amplified every sound, every cry, turning the disciplined legion into a maelstrom of fear and instinct. Yet when they tried to counterattack, the assailants melted into the mist, leaving behind no sign of their presence, no bodies, no trail, only the echoes of their deadly precision. Hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The soldiers moved in tighter formations, their discipline fraying as fatigue and fear gnawed at their resolve. Lucius issued order after order, but the forest ignored him. Paths that seemed clear moments ago twisted, leading men in circles. Scouts went missing. The mist thickened, turning familiar terrain into a labyrinth. Every footstep felt heavier, as if the earth itself resisted their passage. Night fell without mercy. Torches flickered, barely piercing the oppressive darkness. Soldiers huddled, whispering rumors, tribes of the north, giants, spirits of the forest, but no one knew for certain. Even Gaius, who had clung to the stories of Roman invincibility, felt doubt creeping in. The 9th Legion, the pride of Rome, disciplined, trained, unbeatable in open battle, was now prey in a land that did not obey the rules of the empire. And then came the sound that froze every heart. A low, almost inaudible hum, rising and falling like the echo of drums buried beneath the earth. The soldiers stopped, weapons raised, eyes straining through the gloom. Lucius's grip on his sword tightened. The forest itself seemed to pulse with life, breathing in tandem with the men's fear. The legionaries had never faced anything like it. Something was coming, something patient, intelligent, and unstoppable. Somewhere in the darkness, Gaius thought he heard a whisper of his own name, carried on the wind. The soldiers exchanged glances, realization dawning too late. This was not a skirmish they could win. They were deep in enemy territory, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and utterly exposed. They had no idea what waited just beyond the horizon. The night had deepened into a void, suffocating and absolute. The mist now wrapped the 9th Legion like a living shroud, muffling sounds and hiding threats. The low hum from earlier had grown into a chorus, hundreds of unseen forces moving in coordination, circling, watching. Men gripped their weapons, eyes wide, breaths shallow. Some whispered prayers to gods they had ignored in calmer times. Others simply froze, paralyzed by instinctive terror. Lucius Petronius tried to rally his soldiers. "Form ranks. Shield wall." His voice rang sharp, defiant, but the forest answered with silence, then the sharp twang of arrows slicing through the darkness. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fell, screams echoing and swallowed almost instantly by the dense trees. Horses reared and bolted, carrying men into the shadows, never to return. Every tactical maneuver they had trained for failed. The forest twisted, ambushed, and absorbed them. Gaius ran alongside comrades, trying to keep pace, tripping in the mud, gladius slick in his hand. Each fallen soldier added to the terror, yet the forest showed no signs of traditional enemy forces. The legionaries realized slowly, horrifyingly, that they were not simply fighting men, they were fighting the land itself, the unknown, the unseen patterns of an enemy they could not predict. Hours passed, yet time seemed suspended. The mist thickened, shrouding figures in shifting, indistinct shapes. Arrows rained from every direction, and yet none of the attackers could be seen. Lucius shouted orders, but his voice was swallowed. Entire cohorts vanished between trees. Calls for retreat became futile. The 9th Legion, disciplined and proud, was disintegrating, not with the clamor of battle, but with the creeping inevitability of being hunted and consumed. Gaius stumbled, heart hammering, watching men vanish into the gray. Centurion Lucius fell beside him, shield shattered, sword bloodied, eyes wild with disbelief. For the first time, the soldiers of Rome confronted the unthinkable, that discipline, courage, and experience might be powerless against forces outside their comprehension. And then silence. A calm that was not peace, but the absence of everything familiar. No cries, no footsteps, no movement, just the thick, choking fog pressing against the survivors. Those who remained, if any, found themselves surrounded by emptiness. The forest, unyielding and ancient, had swallowed the legion whole. By dawn, the 9th Legion had ceased to exist in any form that Rome could record. No survivors returned, no bodies were recovered, no banners retrieved. Only the eerie whispers of the mist, the distant echo of a horn lost to memory, and the unbroken trees marking the path where one of Rome's greatest legions had marched and never returned. The empire had lost an army, yet history would struggle to even place the moment. What happened in those shadowed woods would become a mystery that haunted scholars for centuries. News of the 9th Legion's disappearance traveled slowly, carried by messengers who only reached Rome weeks later. The reports were fragmented, inconsistent. Some spoke of minor skirmishes, others hinted at entire cohorts annihilated. Senators whispered in the marble halls of the Capitol, their voices low, tense, as if speaking too loudly would summon disaster. Emperor Hadrian, far from Britannia, received the accounts with a measured expression, concealing the storm of anxiety beneath. Losing a legion was not merely a military failure, it was a blow to the empire's prestige, a crack in the illusion of invincibility Rome projected across its territories. Britannia itself shifted in response. Local tribes, emboldened by the mysterious vanishing of Rome's soldiers, grew restless. Skirmishes erupted along the northern frontier, fortifications were tested, and the shadow of the 9th Legion's fate loomed over every Roman outpost. Soldiers stationed elsewhere whispered tales of the forest that consumed men whole, of an enemy that seemed to anticipate every maneuver. Fear spread faster than troops could march. Historians would later speculate, each offering a different account. Some believed the 9th had marched east, only to be annihilated on a distant frontier. Others claimed they had been destroyed by rebellious Britons in a coordinated ambush so complete that no trace remained. Even artifacts, bronze coins, fragments of armor, proved frustratingly scarce. Every physical clue was swallowed by time, mud, and forest. For the soldiers who had survived, if any, life became a shadowed memory, though Rome never officially recorded survivors. Names vanished from rolls, letters remained undelivered, and families awaited news that never came. The disappearance left a vacuum in the historical record, an entire legion erased as if it had never existed. Generals treaded more cautiously, aware that Britannia held dangers that even the might of Rome could not fully counter. The empire adjusted, but unease persisted. Britannia remained a thorn in Rome's side, a frontier where legions could march but never fully claim mastery. The psychological impact was profound, an unspoken acknowledgement that, despite Rome's power, the world still contained mysteries and threats that could defy even the most disciplined legions. Yet in the quiet of the empire, in forums and libraries, questions lingered. Where had the ninth gone? What had happened in those dark woods? The answers were elusive, hidden in the mist and soil of Britannia, leaving only speculation and legend. The consequences stretched far beyond lost soldiers. They shook confidence, challenged strategy, and reminded Rome that even the strongest empire could be humbled by forces beyond comprehension. Centuries later, the Ninth Legion still occupies a ghostly place in history, a story whispered in dusty libraries and recounted in speculative tomes. Archaeologists uncover fragments, an inscription here, a fragment of armor there, but never enough to fully reconstruct the fate of the men who vanished. Each clue teases, each artifact teases, like the forest itself reaching out from the past, refusing to release its secret. The disappearance of the ninth became more than a historical footnote. It became a legend, a cautionary tale about hubris, the limits of power, and the unknowable wilds that lie beyond civilization's reach. Roman commanders centuries later studied Britannia with the shadow of the ninth looming over every campaign, wary of repeating mistakes they could scarcely name. The story of a disciplined legion undone by what could not be seen or anticipated shaped military thinking, folklore, and imagination. Modern historians still debate. Some argue the ninth marched east and were destroyed along the Rhine. Others insist the forest of northern Britannia claimed them entirely. Each theory carries weight, yet none provides closure. Perhaps that is the point. The ninth exists as both history and myth, a reminder that even the mightiest can vanish, leaving only questions and echoes in the fog. For the soldiers themselves, whether consumed by battle, ambush, or the slow erosion of time, names and deeds are swallowed. But for us, the mystery endures. As we peer into the past, the vanished legion invites reflection on courage and discipline, on the limits of empire, and on the fragile boundary between order and oblivion. So when you walk through dense forests or trace the winding paths of history, remember the Ninth Legion. Remember men who marched with certainty into the unknown and were never seen again. Their story is a shadow cast across centuries, a chilling testament to the fact that some mysteries are larger than empires, and some disappearances are eternal.